announcing your departure from Kirkland and your new position at Hilco. So tell us about that move and what's different at Hilco in the year since you've been there and where you're taking Hilco.
But for people who don't know Hilco, I didn't come here to do an advertisement, but I'll just be quick. We're a merchant bank. We do advisory, we do principal investing, we do credit. We've done it for 35 years. A lot of people talk about us as being liquidators. That was the original DNA and bones of the business. I say we're asset smart. We know everything about the value of assets. And the original bones of the business was doing that in the retail liquidation space. Everything we've done is expanded off that into any kind of asset you can think of, knowing the value of it, valuing it for any kind of bank or asset manager. And then dotted line off that, we started buying and selling it, and we started lending on it. And my job basically is to make it bigger, better, faster, stronger, and expand all of those lines of businesses.
Hello there, M&A Advisor community. This is Roger Aguinaldo, and welcome back to the M&A Advisor podcast. Since 1998, the M&A Advisor's mission is to recognize achievements, provide thought leadership, and connect professionals in mergers and acquisitions for the purpose of improving your deal-making craft and accelerating your deal flow. We are so glad you're joining us for this insightful and inspiring podcast conversation curated for mergers and acquisitions professionals. Whether you're an aspiring deal maker, a seasoned professional, or just curious about the world of mergers and acquisitions, you'll find something valuable and relevant in our podcast. Our goal is to bring you the best insights, stories, and tips from the experts who've been there and done that, so you can learn from their successes and mistakes and take your deal-making skills to the next level. But before we dive into today's episode, we have a small favor to ask you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast and find it useful, please consider following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and subscribing to our M&A Alerts newsletter. You can find the links in the description below. This will help us reach more people like you and grow our community of M&A professionals. It will also let us know that you appreciate our work and want us to keep producing more quality content for you. Plus, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll always be in the loop with the latest trends in the M&A world to improve and accelerate your deal making. So please follow us. You are the reason we do what we do, and we couldn't do it without you. And now for today's podcast.
It is, again, my pleasure and privilege to introduce two of the most respected individuals in our racket, and have been for many years. Paul Singerman, the co-chair of Berger Singerman, who has, I believe, won every award there is to win. I'm unaware of one he hasn't won for excellence in restructuring of one sort or another, and is best known, I think, for maintaining his calm in extraordinarily stressful circumstances. And of course, Jamie Sprayregen, who I think in the restructuring world was the first to be known just by one name, Beyonce, Jamie. Jamie took a sleepy Chicago private equity firm and turned it into a restructuring powerhouse. He is indefatigable in terms of energy. A recent report from the New York Times suggested that he was really triplets, but that has yet to be worked out completely. I was delighted to see, however, that last night he was still true to form, that virtually any time I had any interaction with him, he was on two cell phones. We here talking to two different clients or parties. And last night we chatted briefly, and then he said, "Oh, excuse me, I got to take a call." And with that cheerful and uplifting introduction, gentlemen, thank you.
and our thanks to you for that, in my case, wonderfully generous, overly generous introduction. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for sticking around for the last program of the afternoon. I'm looking forward to learning from Jamie about what he's up to. The stated topic in the agenda materials for our discussion is the outlook for restructuring amid a rapidly changing business and political environment. Before we get there, and we will, I told Jamie when we were visiting outside this room a few minutes ago that depending upon which internet source you're going to rely on, it was either just over a year or a year this week that press releases were issued announcing your departure from Kirkland and your new position at Hilco. So tell us about that move and what's different at Hilco in the year since you've been there and where you're taking Hilco.
Greg, thanks for the nice words. I said to Greg last night, I said, when I was a baby lawyer, I remember Greg kicking my butt in a whole bunch of cases. So it was a good educational experience. So good to see you here. And Paul and I worked on many things over the years on the same side, other side, who knows which side. So glad to have him here talking together. With respect to, the timing was a little blurry because I was sort of working two jobs for a few months and I was still a partner at Kirkland, but kind of still doing full-time at Hilco. So that's the blurriness. But for people who don't know Hilco, I didn't come here to do an advertisement, but I'll just be quick. We're a merchant bank. We do advisory. We do principal investing. We do credit. We've done it for 35 years. A lot of people talk about us as being liquidators. That was the original DNA and bones of the business. I say we're asset smart. We know everything about the value of assets. And the original bones of the business was doing that in the retail liquidation space. Everything we've done is expanded off that into any kind of asset you can think of, knowing the value of it, valuing it for any kind of bank or asset manager. And then dotted line off that, we started buying and selling it, and we started lending on it. And my job basically is to make it bigger, better, faster, stronger, and expand all of those lines of businesses. And along with a great team, we have 900-ish people. And we're 70% US, some in London, some in Europe, and some in Australia and New Zealand, and a few little smatterings, and we'll probably be expanding that internationally also. But that's kind of what I'm doing. And it's a dotted line off what I've always done, what I'll call grow businesses, but it's obviously not law, but it's doing deals.
So tell us about what, if anything, and I mean that seriously, what, if anything, you miss from private practice in the law business?
Timesheets.
Timesheets.
Yeah.
There's a trust buster.
But, well, ironically, I would say is, last 10, 15 years of practicing law, I wasn't really practicing law. I said it would have been malpractice for me to write a brief. But it's not really that different. I would say I don't miss that much. We're actually using my old firm, Kirkland, in a major transaction right now, and big group was going into a conference room, and I was standing nearby. They see you coming in for that. And I said, no, I didn't even do that when I was at Kirkland. I'm not doing that. I'm at Hilco right now. So I wouldn't say I miss that much. The legal training is helpful, very helpful. We have a lot of actually ex-lawyers at Hilco who used to be at many of the big firms. And I've done this once before. I kind of can't keep a job. It was kind of interesting symmetry. I was at Kirkland 16 years, then Goldman Sachs as a banker for 3 years, and then Kirkland again 16 years. So now at Hilco. So I don't know what I'll do 16 years from now, but we'll see. But that's kind of where it sits right now.
Okay. So from the perspective of your Hilco seat, let's talk a little bit about what the agenda materials say we're going to talk about. Tell us what you're thinking about changes in the restructuring world as a result of evolving business and political trends. And share with us too, as you did with me briefly outside, what you're hearing about us here and U.S. restructurings from your travels abroad.
Yeah, that's a very politically correct way of asking the question. I'd say a few things, and he mentions travels abroad. I've been traveling a bit the last month or so. I've been in India and Hong Kong and London, and that might do it for countries, but see a lot of people from a number of other countries in those places. And I guess I'd look at it from a macro perspective and a micro perspective. From a micro perspective, just like most of the people in this room, volatility is good to us. And we don't wish ill on anything, but volatility generally produces business. Whether it's volatility up or down, it's just change causes things to happen. That's on a micro basis. On a macro basis, the last speaker I thought put it well. There's a lot of noise and a lot of blurriness as to what's going on right now. But I would say, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's, nobody does. But I would caution against thinking more is going to happen than that so much is going to happen, I guess I'd say, because a lot of things seem like they're changing fast, and then a few weeks go by and they haven't changed that much. I would say from talking to people probably from 15, 20 different countries over the past few weeks, in the world of, comparing themselves, they're, highly interested in what's going on in the United States. I'm always amazed at how closely a number of non-U.S. people follow what's going on in the U.S., in distinction to U.S. people not really knowing where their country is on the map oftentimes. And they're very educated on what's going on in the U.S. And for the most part, in many of those countries, they're kind of used to the volatility in their country that they're seeing here. So and I should mention, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm more of a libertarian, and I'm kind of a double hater. So that's where my orientation comes from. So I'm not taking a view on politics or policy. I'm just, what's it going to do for our business? And, I'd say, assuming there was no volatility and assuming just steady state, I didn't think we were heading for a big, huge restructuring cycle in the next few years. I thought it was pretty steady trickle, steady stream, whatever you want to call it. There's a whole lot of over-levered balance sheets that came out of the wide open capital markets of the decade after the GFC all the way up to COVID. And then COVID allowed even more leverage to be put on. And there's a lot of companies with balance sheets and capital structures that just don't fit. Doesn't mean they're all going bankrupt. Doesn't mean they're all going to go into restructurings, but they're probably all going to need some help in some form or fashion. Could be capital, could be debt, could be equity, could be structured debt or equity. There'll be restructurings, there'll be bankruptcies. So I think there'll be kind of a steady approach to many, many companies in the U.S. and cross-border companies that are going to need help. Now, remember, I said that assumes no volatility and assumes no impact of all the different policies. Depending on where these policies go, and I'm a voracious consumer of data, but the data points every direction. So I'd be loath to give a prediction as to what direction it's going to go. I would say I'm just here to help.
So talk about what restructurings might look like. You said they may not be bankruptcies. One of your former partners spoke just an hour and a half or so ago and said that in the past month or so, his phone had rung more to talk about Article 9, surrenders of collateral and foreclosures, and receiverships and assignments for the benefit of creditors. Tell us about your views about the form and shape that restructurings will take in the future, and if it's materially different from now, why?
Yeah, I think there is sort of an evolution going on. I wouldn't call it a revolution. And, in the financial world, there's not really anything new under the sun. So it's not like brand new. And it's not like science advancing. A lot of things that people talk about, like liability management, it was going by different names, but that goes back a long way. But I think you are seeing, due to the perceived problem with the costs of a pure Chapter 11 process, particularly one, I was going to say one that's a free fall, but even one that's a very clean, say, prearranged or even prepackaged, that's pretty quick. These things are expensive, and that's structurally built into the system. And I think people need to understand that our system is the price of the Chapter 11 process is transparency. And unfortunately, it costs a lot of money to be transparent. And a lot of other systems around the world don't have that level of transparency. And partly as a result, they don't have that level of cost. We can debate the policy of all that, but that's part of what produces that. And the second part is intentionally, it's an adversarial system that produces even further transparency, produces some contention, but that also raises the cost of the process. Now, as a result of that, and I have been doing a lot of soundings, there's a lot of situations out there where people are interested in what I'll call disintermediating the pure bankruptcy system and saying, liability management is an element of that, but just out-of-court restructurings and then Article 9s, receiverships, assignments for the benefit of creditors, those are all manifestations really of people looking at sort of more cost-effective ways to deal with problems. And it's particularly relevant in the middle market, the lower middle market situations, because those are where the costs can really eat the situation alive. But I would say even in some pretty large situations, and I think it's kind of creeping up the ladder, even if it's not completely based on costs, it could be just more efficient, quicker, and save a bunch of money to go through some non-Chapter 11 process that basically achieves the same result. Might not get the exact same level of closure, but every case doesn't need the exact same level of closure. And I do think that's a trend that we should all be focused on. And in terms of, I heard Jay Goffman giving advice on how to succeed. I've always said if you can make all your money on one deal, you might be able to make a lot of money. But if you can satisfy the client and everybody in the situation and not make that much money and get the next 100 deals, you make a lot more money. So I think it's not a flow that should be resisted if it makes sense in a particular situation.
And your view, not only to not resist the flow, but to prepare for it. What's your advice?
I would, in any particular situation, not assume anything, not assume Chapter 11 is the best answer. I would say, look at the facts, look at what's needed to address whatever the problem is. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And discuss the alternatives, not just with the client, but probably with whoever the other stakeholders are, assuming there's a deal, and structure whatever the resolution is in a way that best accommodates all those needs. And like I said, it won't be perfect, but as close as you can get to that. And some of it, sometimes you need the Chapter 11, but other times some of these other processes will be good enough.
So lots of talk now in the marketplace about the potential impact of the increasing resort to private credit as opposed to institutional other forms of debt. Is this another example of something that you think is not new, or is it qualitatively different now, and the extent to which private credit's involving itself in our world?
Yeah, on the one hand, it's not really new. I mean, you've had mezzanine lenders. People don't even use that term much anymore, but you had that. You had these unitranches, which before you had unitranches, you just had loans that was before first and second liens, and now back to unitranche, you just had loans. And so private credit, on the one hand, I don't think is that new. I think the scale of the growth of the private credit business is new, and I think it being done from an asset management standpoint and an aggregation of AUM is somewhat new. I actually think it's partly a product of regulatory arbitrage, and I don't mean that pejoratively in the least. And it's, I think, healthy for the system, produces healthy competition amongst private credit providers and private credit providers vis-a-vis the broadly syndicated market, broadly syndicated loan market. And so it is people are predicting how big the asset class can be. It went from basically 0 or 200 billion to 1.5 to 2 trillion today, that it could, I've heard a lot of big numbers, but could go a lot higher, or a lot higher than where it is today. And there's a lot of folks looking to provide that asset class to borrowers. By the way, that's one thing at Hilco that we're doing more and more of, and particularly from the asset-based lending standpoint. And I think that's sort of I don't know if I call it the next frontier of private credit, but you're seeing a lot more asset-based lending, private credit, than you did when the asset class grew from sort of 0 to $1.5 trillion. and I think that's going to even accelerate over the next few years.
Do you have a view of the proper characterization, the mindset of private credit versus institutional debt versus syndicated debt?
Yeah.
Is one kinder and gentler than the other or not? And if so, which?
No, I think there's different, different structures drive different kinds of conduct. So I wouldn't say one's better or worse. And you just got to understand the structure that's involved and which kind of conduct that drives. Everybody's ultimate objective is to get their money back and to do more loans. But there's different dynamics when you only have one or two lenders in your private credit syndicate, put that in quote marks, than when you have 20 run by JP Morgan and there's an agent. So that drives, different kinds of conduct. And so I think when you get involved in a situation, you just got to understand the structure and understand what drives it. It's not just, although I would say everybody's money is not the same color of green.
So in a few weeks, you're speaking at the Grant Interest Rate Observer Conference, and you're supposed to be sharing your views about where we are in the recycling cycle, restructuring cycle, and recycling in the restructuring cycle.
It's a bit of recycling,
and where we're headed. So, if we all promise not to tell, what are you going to be telling people in a few weeks at the conference?
I don't want to give it away, but I sort of already talked about where that I don't think a huge, barring who knows what, and I'll talk more about that in April. But where we are at this moment, and assuming away volatility, which, by the way, it's like that economist joke about, well, it works in practice, but what about in theory? Assuming away volatility, there's a lot of activity out there. It's not, the March of 2020 during COVID when there was a tsunami of activity, or, October of 2008 when there was a double tsunami of activity. But there's as I said, a steady stream or a steady, more than a trickle. That seems like it's got a long tail on it, unlike the cycles of COVID, which basically I said we did a 5-year restructuring cycle in 2.5 quarters, and the GFC people thought that was going to be a 10-year restructuring cycle, and it was more like 18 to 24 months. And so to me, this is more elongated, and also partly because things are spread out further from the banks, courtesy of private credit and some other structures, not as systemically relevant / dangerous, and is being worked out at a somewhat more leisurely, is probably not the best word, but somewhat more leisurely elongated pace.
So most vulnerable and most immune industries and sectors to restructuring activity.
Well, the most vulnerable are the ones who think they're immune. And I would say any company that's subject to technological disruption, which, by the way, maybe is everybody, and we're seeing, that you used to say the tech area is going to do a restructure. What's the tech area these days? It's kind of everybody. And so to me, that's a huge theme. Second is, I mentioned just a number, it's not really, I'm industry agnostic. It's more companies that built capital structures that they thought they could grow into, that they knew were unsustainable over the long period of time, but with the sufficient amount of growth, they grow into it. And with some companies that's happened, with some cohort of companies that's not happening, and they're going to just have to, deal with those issues. So I think that's probably the two biggest themes.
So as you think through what you'll be doing more in the future in your role at Hilco, in anticipating and responding to the evolution of the restructuring world, what's going to be different in what you do in 5 years?
Well, I think for me personally and for Hilco, we're intend to have a large private credit offering in the asset-based lending space. We intend to have a larger advisory business, and we intend to be making more principal investments. And we intend to kind of do that, what I'll call the virtual cycle, where different parts of those businesses will produce different opportunities for other parts of those businesses. And hopefully produce opportunities for a number of people in this room. So that's what I'll do, and tend to exercise my brain and have some fun and make a little money.
There we go. Having fun and making a little bit of money and helping the people in this room is probably a very good place to suspend our discussion for now, and look forward to seeing you and others tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new from it. If you have any questions or comments for us or any of our guests, please feel free to leave them in the podcast platform of your choice, or send us an email at editor@maadvisor.com. We would love to hear from you and get your feedback. And if you haven't done so already, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and subscribe to our M&A Alerts newsletter at the links in the description or on our website at www.maadvisor.com. This will help you stay updated on the latest M&A interviews and trends, and support our podcast to grow and reach more listeners like you. This is Roger Aguinaldo, the creator and founder of the M&A Advisor. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our M&A Advisor community. Until next time, stay safe and happy dealing.